back at it with another ridiculous one, I guess you can say. A pair of GBX. Don't know, more info in the description if so on it. But yeah, these aren't very expensive shoes or boots that have a number of things going on and a number of things that we're not allowed to touch, basically, including all these paint splatters here. So they have some sentimentality to them, which is understandable, but we gotta resole these and rebuild these. So come join us, check out the process, and let's get it going, I guess. So thank you for joining us, and as you can tell, these are in rough shape, and there's not much I can do as far as being able to take care of the uppers because they're kind of off limits for me to be able to do. But first things first, we gotta start breaking these down and seeing what's going on the inside of them. Now these have been resoled before, it looks like by a previous cobbler, where they had just glued on one of these Vibram gum-like soles over top of the, you know, a portion of the original sole. So basically they just cut and ground down just a portion of that. And what we're going to be doing is giving these a major upgrade, because we're going to convert them into a bloke stitched design. And boy, I'll tell you what, I'm not too excited on this pair, just because I already know that this whole thing's going to fall apart in my hand, and we are going to be putting a new footbed in here as well. Oh, there's super glue. That was what I was really afraid of. Gotta be a little bit careful, because otherwise the super glue has a chemical reaction with the rubber sole that was originally on there. So this is a portion of the original rubber sole here. You can see it was ground down and everything here, and then the new Vibram crepe, blown rubber crepe sole was just glued on over top. In some of the areas it looks like they touched up with some super glue. This rubber has a pretty good reaction with super glue sometimes, and once it finally cures, again, curing times can vary, but once it finally cures it really sticks. And when you've got a pretty worn out boot like that, it can possibly damage everything on the way out. Let me just double check the ticket here. Alright, so yeah, these are definitely gonna need new footbeds, because the back of the heel is just shot, in other words, and it's a cardboard in these on top of that. So all of this is coming right out. I'm getting a lot of these jobs lately where I have to tear out the footbed and replace it and everything. I hate dealing with this kind of stuff. Surprisingly, the shank isn't broken, at least not on this boot. That's a surprise. The shank is kind of embedded into the footbed and everything, and we definitely need this footbed because it's kind of part of the structural integrity of the boot, and especially since we're going to be stitching a sole onto these, I have to make sure that that the base is in great shape. So I'm going to go ahead and trace this out of some leather and start replicating it with actual leather instead of this cardboard stuff. Kind of gross. Probably, man, I wish I could clean these out, but I can't clean them. I'll just have to blow everything out and vacuum it out and everything. As far as the liner on this is all man-made here, and air compressor cut on, but I told the owner of these that the liner replacement is just not going to be practical on these, and it's in rough shape. I'll see if I can touch up some of the spots with some adhesive here and there, at least a little bit, but this overall job is not practical, in other words. So I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the insides a little bit, get some of this gunk out of there, and start working on those footbeds. Alright everyone, so we've got the heel bases on these guys and kind of trimmed out roughly and everything all around. But at this point I gotta make sure that the heel blocks that we put on, the new leather ones, are leveled out properly. And so, just as an example, one of them I'd already started working on the leveling, and the other one I haven't quite touched, but this kind of gives you some perspective. Now, if I can get this to be a little bit lower, let me unclip it. But there it is. You can see that one's a lot better level-wise as far as how the foot and everything sits and everything's lined up. This one here has a big old gap right there, meaning that if we leave it like that, that foot's going to be raised, so the person's really going to feel this part of that edge. So we're going to end up grinding that down until it's leveled and everything sits a little more flush, kind of like this one does here, when it sits nice and flat. But yeah, got to make sure to do that. I was kind of just going through everything. So basically these ones we had designed them to be a Blake rapid stitch design, so that way the leather midsole is Blake stitched to the boot, and then the sole itself is rapid stitch or outsole stitched to that midsole. In other words, it makes it a lot more durable, a lot more secure. Originally we were planning to do a Blake stitch just on the rubber sole and put a fake welt trim and everything, but I thought structurally it's not going to hold up on these boots very well, so we gave them a little bit more of an upgrade, in other words, for these boots for this gentleman here. So let me go ahead and level out the other heel, make sure everything's all lined up, and continue on. Alright everyone, so it's been very hectic, it's been chaotic, you know, being short-staffed and everything, and so I had gone ahead and jumped ahead a little bit with as far as like the edging and stuff, and that's kind of normal things I've shown in some of my previous videos, so I'm not going to really show all the details and stuff about that. So obviously, like I mentioned with these, so basically we constructed these a little bit different than originally we were planning. The plan originally was to add a fake welt onto these, which it just gets glued on, and then the sole would end up just getting Blake stitched on, kind of like we did the midsole on these, where instead I did a different approach, which was going to be a little bit more sturdy for these particular boots, and we did the midsole as the, in other words, the welt. It's stitched to the boot, and then the sole itself is stitched to that midsole, making it a lot more sturdy. We've got the new leather stacked heel bases as well. And then over that, obviously, we put a GTO top lift. We did a brown one. Now, some of you might say, well, why didn't you put the matching heel on? Because the Vibram 700, which is this V-bar shaped one, does have a matching heel to it as well. However, this gentleman had requested a leather stacked heel base just because it kind of looks a little more dressy, in other words, where when you match up the heel to it, it still has that kind of like work look style and everything, where this just gives it that little bit of dressy look to it as well. On the inside, we did put a new leather insole in there that has a cushion, so that kind of helps cover things up. Don't know if that's visible on the camera or not. You can kind of see that glitter, you know, glare from the light, in other words, from it. Now, in order to make these boots perfect, there was a number of things that we probably should have done to make them perfect, but Obviously it adds to the cost. Some of it may take away from the whole purpose of these being sentimental. Obviously with these paint splatters, it's sentimental on these, so I don't have permission to do anything, which makes it a lot harder on the uppers. One thing that Cobblers are able to do when we're doing boots and shoes, every now and then, no matter how good of a cobbler you are, you may end up accidentally nicking a side somewhere, whether it's with a tool, whether it's on one of the sanders or the buffing wheel. But because we're going to add a little bit of conditioning on it as well, we're going to kind of buff it over, clean it up a little bit nicely, or in some cases, if you go for the all-out full treatments and stuff like that, or bath treatments, we really are able to take care of that very well, and it's not visible. Where in this case, it makes it a little more difficult, kind of like the luxury, red bottom shoes that we do frequently, the Louis Vuittons, where we have to be very careful. Don't touch the uppers, don't let anything touch it, all that kind of stuff. And it's kind of the same story with these. There are things that we can do, like put them in plastic and stuff like that, and then work while it's in plastic, which is definitely a good idea to do, but it makes it a little bit hard when we start getting into certain small details where that plastic is just getting in the way. So I thought I'd kind of point out some of those things. The other thing is, the toe counter, the heel counter in these is shot right there, but we weren't replacing the heel counter, and if we were to replace the heel counter at that point, I would have to do liners. Vice versa, if I was to do the liners, I have to do the heel counter because it's too shot in order for the new heel liner to adhere. The lining inside too, could have replaced that, but it's all up to the individual how far they want to take it. Cost is the big factor to have to consider, that you can see how much work goes into this. Now obviously not everything was shown on camera as far as all the small details that we have to do and everything, but it's a lot of work, and these things are not a fun pair to do, unfortunately. Now obviously I'm not going to do a cash or trash episode on these because these are more of a sentimental type of boot. What Janelle was able to find on these as far as like online, she found them on eBay for like 35 bucks and everything like that, and the amount of work that went into these was over $300 worth, in other words, because we had a new footbed put in there, new leather stacked heel bases, the sole and midsole, we kind of redid it a little bit as a different option, kind of gave them a little bit more of an upgrade than we originally anticipated with that construction of being Blake rapid stitch design and everything. So I'm pretty sure he'll be happy with it, and yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, upgrading a pair of just demolished boots, in other words, to something even better, and kept the sentimentality with the way the uppers are. One option is that I will let him know later on. I don't want to do this for him right now unless I get permission, but waterproofing at the very least would help these, but I don't want to do so because no matter how delicate of a waterproofer it may be, I don't know what kind of paint this is and stuff, and it may still have a slight chemical reaction where either colors can change or start bleeding, even with a light spritz. I don't recommend it if your goal is to keep whatever this may be. If you have a pair of shoes with some kind of paint work on it, definitely be very careful and just test it out in just a few areas beforehand, and then go ahead and do the whole thing and stuff like that. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely give a thumbs up, subscribe, hit that notification bell icon to be notified when we have our next recraft video or whatever other videos we may have up, and we'll see you next time.